Have you ever wondered who would win in a battle between history's greatest warriors? Today we're diving deep into the lives of the 10 most skilled fighters who ever lived. And trust me, some of these stories will blow your mind. From samurai who could cut through steel to Vikings who struck fear into entire empires, we're about to explore warriors whose legends have survived for thousands of years. But here's the thing that makes this list absolutely fascinating. We're not just talking about brute strength or fancy weapons. These warriors mastered combat through years of brutal training, innovative tactics, and an almost supernatural understanding of warfare that set them apart from everyone else on the battlefield. So grab something to drink and get comfortable, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why these 10 individuals became the gold standard for what it means to be a true warrior. And I guarantee at least 3 of these entries will completely change how you think about ancient combat. Let's start with number 10. And this one's going to surprise you because most people have never even heard his name, despite the fact that he revolutionized warfare in ways we still use today. Belisarius, the Byzantine general who lived in the 6th century, deserves recognition as one of history's most brilliant military minds. What made him extraordinary wasn't just his tactical genius, but his ability to win battles while being dramatically outnumbered. This guy regularly defeated armies twice or 3 times the size of his own forces through pure strategic brilliance. The most incredible example of his skill happened during the Gothic War in Italy. Belisarius found himself defending Rome with just 5,000 men against an entire Gothic army of over 100,000 warriors. Instead of cowering behind the city walls, he used psychological warfare and lightning-fast cavalry strikes to create chaos in the enemy ranks. He would attack at dawn, retreat before the enemy could organize, then strike again from a completely different direction at sunset. What's even more impressive is that Belisarius understood the importance of combined arms tactics centuries before other military leaders caught on. He coordinated infantry, cavalry, and archers in ways that maximized each unit's strengths while covering their weaknesses. His mounted archers could rain death from a distance, while his heavy cavalry smashed through enemy lines at precisely the right moment. But here's what really sets him apart. Belisarius won these massive victories without the resources that other great generals had access to. The Byzantine Empire was struggling financially, so he had to be creative with limited troops and supplies. This constraint actually made him a better warrior because it forced him to rely on intelligence and innovation rather than overwhelming force. Moving to number 9, we encounter a warrior whose name has become synonymous with tactical brilliance and whose strategies are still taught in military academies around the world. Hannibal Barca earned his place among history's greatest warriors not through individual combat prowess, but through his absolutely devastating effectiveness as a military commander. This Carthaginian general terrified the Roman Empire for over 15 years, and his crossing of the Alps with elephants remains one of the most audacious military maneuvers ever attempted. What made Hannibal so dangerous was his ability to think several moves ahead of his enemies. At the Battle of Cannae, he demonstrated tactical genius that military historians still study today. Facing a Roman army of 80,000 men with only 50,000 of his own troops, Hannibal used a double envelopment maneuver that completely destroyed the larger force. Here's how brilliant this strategy was. Hannibal deliberately weakened his center line and allowed the Romans to push forward, thinking they were winning. Meanwhile, his stronger wing units curved around both sides of the advancing Romans, like a closing trap. By the time the Roman commanders realized what was happening, they were completely surrounded with no escape route. The psychological impact of Hannibal's victories was just as important as the tactical ones. Roman mothers would scare their children by telling them Hannibal was coming. The mere mention of his name could cause panic in Roman cities hundreds of miles from any battlefield. This level of psychological warfare shows a warrior who understood that breaking enemy morale was just as effective as breaking enemy formations. What's particularly impressive about Hannibal is that he maintained his army's effectiveness while operating in enemy territory for years without reliable supply lines. He had to constantly adapt his tactics based on available resources while keeping his diverse coalition of troops motivated and unified against a common enemy. Number 8 takes us to ancient China, where we find a warrior whose philosophy of combat influenced martial arts and military strategy for thousands of years. Sun Tzu stands apart from other warriors on this list because his greatest weapon wasn't a sword or spear, but his mind. As both a general and philosopher, Sun Tzu understood that the highest form of warfare was winning without fighting at all. His book, The Art of War contains insights about strategy and human psychology that remain relevant today. What made Sun Tzu such an effective warrior was his emphasis on intelligence gathering and understanding both himself and his enemies completely. He believed that if you knew your enemy's strengths, weaknesses, motivations, and likely responses, you could manipulate situations to achieve victory with minimal bloodshed. Sun Tzu's approach to warfare was incredibly modern for his time. He emphasized speed, deception, and striking at unexpected moments when enemies were unprepared. Rather than engaging in prolonged battles that depleted resources and manpower, he preferred quick, decisive actions that achieved strategic objectives efficiently. One of his most famous principles states that all warfare is based on deception. This wasn't just about lying to enemies, but creating false impressions about your intentions, capabilities, and positions. Sun Tzu would make small armies appear large through clever positioning, or make large armies appear to be somewhere they weren't through strategic misinformation. The psychological aspects of Sun Tzu's warfare philosophy were centuries ahead of their time. He understood that breaking enemy morale and creating confusion in their command structure was often more valuable than killing enemy soldiers. A demoralized army would flee or surrender without fighting, preserving your own forces while achieving the same strategic result as a costly victory. Number 7 brings us to medieval Europe, where we encounter a warrior whose personal combat skills were matched by his ability to inspire others in the darkest of circumstances. Richard the Lionheart earned his fearsome reputation during the Third Crusade, where his combination of personal bravery and tactical innovation made him legendary among both allies and enemies. What set Richard apart wasn't just his skill with weapons, but his ability to lead from the front while making smart strategic decisions under pressure. Richard's fighting style was particularly effective because he combined the heavy cavalry charge tactics of medieval Europe with more flexible approaches he'd learned from studying his Muslim opponents. He understood that rigid adherence to traditional methods would lead to defeat against adaptable enemies who knew how to counter European tactics. At the Battle of Arsout, Richard demonstrated his tactical brilliance by maintaining perfect discipline among his troops during a grueling march under constant harassment from Saladin's forces. When the moment was right, he unleashed a coordinated cavalry charge that shattered the Muslim army, despite being outnumbered and exhausted from days of fighting. What made Richard particularly dangerous was his personal combat ability combined with his inspirational leadership. Soldiers would follow him into seemingly impossible situations because they had seen him fight alongside them in the most dangerous parts of every battle. This wasn't a general who commanded from safety. Richard was always where the fighting was thickest. The psychological impact of Richard's presence on medieval battlefields cannot be overstated. Enemy forces would often lose cohesion when they realized they were facing the Lionheart himself. This reputation became a weapon as powerful as his sword, allowing him to achieve victories through intimidation and the enemy's fear of his legendary combat prowess. Moving to number 6, we travel to ancient Macedonia to examine a warrior whose tactical innovations changed the face of warfare permanently. Alexander the Great revolutionized ancient combat through his perfect integration of different military units and his absolutely fearless personal leadership style. What made Alexander extraordinary was his ability to see battlefield opportunities that other commanders missed entirely, then exploit those openings with lightning speed and devastating effectiveness. Alexander's signature tactical formation, the Macedonian phalanx, supported by elite cavalry units, was virtually unstoppable when properly executed. The phalanx would fix enemy forces in place with their long spears, while Alexander personally led cavalry charges against vulnerable flanks or weak points in enemy lines. But Alexander's greatest strength was his adaptability to different enemies and terrain. Against Greek city-states, he used traditional formations. Against Persian forces, he modified his tactics to counter their archery and cavalry. In India, he developed new approaches to deal with war elephants and unfamiliar fighting styles. The speed of Alexander's campaigns was unprecedented in ancient warfare. He could move his army across vast distances faster than enemies could organize effective responses. This mobility allowed him to choose when and where battles would occur, giving him tremendous strategic advantages before fighting even began. What really set Alexander apart was his ability to inspire absolute loyalty and courage in his troops. Soldiers would follow him anywhere because they had seen him share their dangers and hardships. Alexander was wounded repeatedly in combat, but never retreated, creating a legend that motivated his men to fight beyond their normal limits. Number 5 takes us to feudal Japan, where we encounter a warrior culture that elevated combat to an art form requiring decades of dedication to master. The samurai represent perhaps the most disciplined and skilled individual warriors in human history. Their training began in childhood and continued throughout their entire lives, creating fighters who could react with deadly precision in split-second situations. What made samurai particularly formidable was their combination of physical skill, mental discipline, and philosophical understanding of combat. Samurai's sword techniques were developed over centuries to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum wasted motion. Every cut, thrust, and defensive movement was practiced thousands of times until it became completely instinctive. This level of training meant that samurai could fight effectively even when injured, exhausted, or facing multiple opponents simultaneously. The mental aspect of samurai training was just as important as the physical techniques. Through meditation and philosophical study, samurai learned to remain calm and focused in life or death situations. This mental clarity allowed them to assess threats accurately and respond with appropriate force while maintaining perfect emotional control. What distinguished samurai from other warrior classes was their code of honor that governed every aspect of their lives. This wasn't just about fighting bravely. Samurai were expected to be scholars, administrators, and moral examples for society. This broad education made them more effective leaders and strategists beyond their individual combat capabilities. The samurai's mastery of multiple weapons gave them tremendous versatility in different combat situations. They were experts with swords, bows, spears, and various specialized weapons, allowing them to adapt their fighting style to whatever circumstances they encountered on the battlefield. At number 4, we examine warriors whose fierce reputation struck terror into civilized societies across multiple continents. Viking warriors earned their fearsome reputation through their combination of sailing skills, combat effectiveness, and absolutely ruthless approach to warfare. What made Vikings particularly dangerous was their ability to appear suddenly from the sea, strike hard and fast, then disappear before organized resistance could form. The Viking approach to combat emphasized aggression, speed, and psychological intimidation. Their signature weapon, the battle axe, could cleave through armor and shields with devastating effect. Vikings also mastered the use of swords, spears, and shields in close-quarters combat that often decided battles in ancient times. What set Vikings apart from other raiders was their seamanship and navigation skills that allowed them to attack targets that seemed completely safe from assault. They could sail up rivers deep into continental Europe, launch surprise attacks, then escape along waterways that pursuing armies couldn't follow. Viking tactics focused on creating chaos and fear in enemy ranks rather than fighting prolonged battles against organized opposition. They excelled at night raids, ambush tactics, and targeting civilians and infrastructure to demoralize entire regions. This psychological warfare made them appear more numerous and dangerous than their actual numbers suggested. The Vikings' exploration and colonization efforts demonstrate their incredible toughness and adaptability. They established settlements everywhere from Iceland to North America, often in harsh environments that would defeat less resilient peoples. This pioneering spirit made them formidable opponents who couldn't be defeated simply by making their homeland unsafe. Number 3 brings us to the steppes of Central Asia, where nomadic peoples produced some of history's most feared mounted warriors. The Mongol cavalry revolutionized medieval warfare through their unmatched mobility, archery skills, and innovative tactics that devastated settled civilizations across 2 continents. What made Mongol warriors so effective was their lifetime of training in horsemanship and archery that began in early childhood. Every Mongol warrior was essentially a mobile artillery unit, capable of shooting arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. This combination of speed and firepower allowed relatively small Mongol forces to defeat much larger armies by staying mobile and avoiding direct confrontation until enemies were sufficiently weakened. Mongol tactical flexibility was unprecedented in medieval warfare. They could fight as light cavalry skirmishers, heavy shock troops, or dismounted infantry depending on the situation. This adaptability meant that enemies could never predict Mongol behavior or prepare effective countermeasures. The Mongol emphasis on intelligence gathering and psychological warfare gave them tremendous advantages before battles even began. They would spread terror through stories of their cruelty while simultaneously gathering detailed information about enemy capabilities, weaknesses, and internal divisions they could exploit. What made the Mongols particularly dangerous was their meritocratic military structure that promoted the most capable warriors regardless of their social background. This created an officer corps of exceptional quality that could execute complex coordinated maneuvers across vast battlefields with devastating precision. Our number 2 warrior represents the pinnacle of Spartan military excellence and individual combat prowess. Leonidas demonstrated extraordinary leadership and personal courage at the Battle of Thermopylae, where his tactical positioning and inspirational leadership allowed a tiny force to inflict massive casualties on a vastly superior Persian army. What made Leonidas legendary wasn't just his willingness to die for his principles, but his strategic understanding of how to maximize his force's effectiveness against overwhelming odds. The Spartan military system that produced Leonidas was unlike anything else in the ancient world. From age 7, Spartan boys underwent brutal training that eliminated anyone who couldn't meet their extremely high standards. This selection process created warriors who were physically and mentally superior to opponents from other societies. Leonidas understood that his mission at Thermopylae wasn't to win a traditional victory, but to buy time for Greek city-states to organize their defenses. His tactical positioning in the narrow pass nullified the Persian numerical advantage while maximizing the effectiveness of his heavily armored hoplites. What set Leonidas apart was his ability to maintain unit cohesion and fighting effectiveness even when facing certain death. His leadership inspired his men to fight with superhuman courage and determination that turned a military defeat into a moral victory that inspired all of Greece to resist Persian invasion. The psychological impact of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans extended far beyond their actual military contribution. Their sacrifice became a rallying cry that motivated Greek resistance and demonstrated that Persian forces could be defeated through superior training, discipline, and courage. And finally, our number 1 warrior, whose name has become synonymous with strategic brilliance and tactical innovation that influenced military thinking for over 2,000 years. Julius Caesar stands alone among history's warriors because he combined personal combat skills with political genius and strategic vision that transformed the ancient world permanently. What made Caesar extraordinary was his ability to win battles through superior preparation, tactical flexibility, and inspirational leadership that motivated his troops to achieve seemingly impossible victories. Caesar's military innovations included improved logistics, engineering, and communication systems that gave his legions significant advantages over opponents who relied on traditional methods. His armies could march faster, fight longer, and adapt more quickly to changing battlefield conditions than any other forces of his era. The speed and audacity of Caesar's campaigns were unprecedented in ancient warfare. He could move between widely separated theaters of operations faster than enemies could coordinate their responses, allowing him to defeat opponents individually rather than facing unified coalitions. What truly set Caesar apart was his political understanding that military victories needed to serve broader strategic objectives. Every campaign was planned not just to win battles, but to advance his long-term goals of expanding Roman power and enhancing his own position within the Roman system. Caesar's ability to inspire absolute loyalty among his troops created a military force that was more effective than the sum of its individual components. His soldiers would follow him anywhere because they trusted his judgment and knew he would share both their dangers and their rewards. So there you have it, the 10 most skilled warriors in human history, each one representing a different aspect of what it means to achieve excellence in combat. From Belisarius's tactical brilliance to Caesar's comprehensive mastery of warfare, these individuals set standards that fighters and military leaders still aspire to reach today. What's fascinating is how different their approaches were, yet they all achieved legendary status through dedication, innovation, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Whether you're interested in ancient history, martial arts, or just incredible stories of human achievement, these warriors remind us that greatness comes from pushing beyond what seems possible. Which of these warriors impressed you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, because next week we're exploring the greatest battles in history where these legendary fighters proved their worth. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.